Diolch am bawb and dod. Good afternoon, welcome to Regeneration, Public Protection and Housing Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday, the 11th of October 2022. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast by the authority's internet site, and images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the authority. Oof, hell of a speech. Right, moving on, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Sorry, Mike. Okay, thank you. Do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got to leave the meeting at 4:45.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Councillor Salmon. Michelle, are you?
Yes, Chair, I need to leave as soon as my part is over.
Councillor Anna Williams-Price.
Thank you, Chair, and I will also need to leave at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Moving on, agenda item 2, declarations of interest. No, I have none. Moving on, forward work program, agenda item 3. Anybody got any comments? No? I think Anna brought up a question with me yesterday about the police and to see if we can. Sorry, Anna, do you want to come in?
Apologies. Yeah, just in reference to the upcoming agenda item, which would involve inviting South Wales Police. I know we originally discussed when setting the forward work programme whether dangerous driving or nuisance driving could be included, and I think in light of recent events across the borough, it's important that that's included in the session that's upcoming in this cycle. So if the committee is agreeable, I recommend that when we invite South Wales Police, they are made aware that dangerous driving and their response will be on the agenda, and also ask if we could receive a complimentary report from the relevant cabinet member on the council's approach to the topic.
Yeah, I agree. Paul, yeah.
Yes, Chair. I've spoken briefly with Neil today in relation to the scrutiny programme. One of the suggestions I've made to Neil is we've been working with South Wales Police over the last month in relation to the community safety partnership landscape for the county borough, and obviously with some of the incidents we've had in recent weeks with car crime and youth associated antisocial behaviour. And we've come up with a joint enforcement strategy with South Wales Police. We've actually met this morning, the Chief Executive, Deputy Chief Executive, myself and the recent Superintendent. And one of the suggestions that we've got is we meet with Scrutiny on a workshop basis to outline what the proposed new landscape will look like, what we will then report to Scrutiny at further Scrutiny committees, with a table of action and what your expectations are of this joint working strategy. So with Scrutiny's permission, what I would propose, and I'll speak to Neil, is to facilitate that workshop where we can have that share of dialogue in terms of the new landscape moving forward, with a view to setting out an action plan that we can then come before Scrutiny at future Scrutiny committees and outline how we are meeting that proposal.
Great, thanks, Paul. Okay. Okay. Yeah, moving on. Agenda item 4, empty buildings in the County Borough Council. Alan, I have had a request to move the empty properties first. Shana, I think is it W then? I think can we move that to you as first, please?
That would be me.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry, that's okay. Councillor Davis is fine. Our empty property strategy 2022 to 2026 was approved by full council in February 2022. The council continues in its commitment to deal with empty properties. The strategy outlines the approach we take by providing a clear direction for addressing empty homes, which blight our communities and adversely affect our neighbourhoods. The causes for homes becoming empty are complex, and no one size fits all to bring these properties back into use. Homes that have been empty for more than 6 months are deemed to be long-term empty homes and are not only a waste of valuable resource, but can also be a source of serious antisocial behaviour, nuisance to neighbouring properties, and in some cases blight an area. For this reason, they are a primary focus of our strategy. Where homes have been brought back into use, they have helped to reinvigorate communities and provide additional housing to our residents. There are currently 568 long-term empty homes across the county borough. Our aim over the next 5 years is to bring a further 200 empty homes back into use. To achieve this, we will build on the progress already made and continue to work in partnership with empty home owners and our partners. An integral part of the strategy is our action plan. Bringing empty homes back into use can take a long time to resolve, especially where owners are not actively engaged with the authority. The strategy is relatively new, and it will be the end of this financial year before we are able to measure any progress made against the aims of the plan. It is not yet known what impact, if any, of the pandemic or the current living crisis will be on the progress of this strategy. I will now hand over to Officer Sian James for the presentation, and it'll start Appendix 4, page 25.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'll introduce myself first of all. I'm Sian James, the Environmental Health Manager with Merthyr Council. This is Melissa Clee, who's the Principal Environmental Health Officer that leads on many of these empty home issues. Apologies, but the PowerPoint system isn't working, so I will be following the one that says, what are we doing about empty homes? Have you all got that? Yeah. Okay. You should also have a copy of the empty property strategy as well as background information. So as Councillor Simmons said, we have 568 long-term empty homes within the borough. We recognise that the empty homes are a wasted resource, particularly when there is a need for more housing. They cause social and environmental impacts arising from these empty properties and are a blight on the area. And as Councillor Simmons mentioned, there's no size fits all to remedy the situation. Some of the environmental and social problems that we receive to deal with as complaints within environmental health relate to rodent infestations, fly tipping, and general poor impression of an area when you have an empty home within an area. It also attracts crime, and which can include vandalism, antisocial behaviour, and drug abuse as some of the issues. And they can also cause a statutory nuisance to other properties within the area. They definitely have a negative impact on communities and are resource intensive in dealing with complaints relating to these properties, and that can be across the public sector, which includes emergency services such as the police and fire safety. There are risks to the public as well from unsafe structures and insecure properties where people can enter these properties. And it can have a detrimental effect on house prices within an area. I move on to the slide that has performance data. This highlights the trends since 2012 to last year. So we haven't got any data, obviously, for the strategy at the moment because it's an annual monitoring exercise, and that will be done in Q4 of this financial year. But as you can see from the table, we have historically managed to return between 30-ish, 29 to 40 properties, 42 within given years during that period. It is a key performance indicator, and as I said, it is monitored on an annual basis. The empty property strategy was approved earlier this year. So we are in our first year of the 5-year strategy, and the aims are to unlock the housing potential of long-term empty homes by bringing 7% of those empty properties back into use each year. And the target, therefore, is 200 homes to be brought back into use in the next 5 years, which equates to approximately 40 properties per year. At the moment, we don't know what the impact, if any, of the pandemic and the current cost of living crisis may have on the effectiveness of this strategy. How do we bring homes back into use? I've got a table there with 4 quadrants to it, starting with the most the least resource intensive, which is the engagement, up to enforcement. And the first one being engagement. We've recently sent letters out to all owners of properties with a questionnaire, and that is generating a lot of phone calls to the officers, and it leads on to stage 2 and 3 and eventually 4. Enforcement is our last option. It does take a long time to take enforcement action against a property owner when we're trying to bring it back into use. But enforcement also is ongoing, where there's those properties that have the issues that we mentioned earlier on, environmental issues, so in securing properties, so they are draining on resources. But when it comes to enforced sales, that's quite a big step, and therefore does require quite a bit of time and resources to implement. Like I said, I'm unable to give you an update as to our progress since the strategy was implemented earlier this year, but Melissa will be able to answer questions on more details in relation to the strategy. So thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting to note that you mentioned that we've still got 560 properties that are empty. And you just referred to, on page 30, enforcement. That's the last option. Or compulsory purchase mentioned there. These properties are an absolute blight on every area we have them. I'll come to my question, but in my ward, for example, I'm aware of 2, and there will be more, but are very long-term empty. One of them has been empty for over 30 years. There's another one not a million miles away, which I know has been empty, and the curtains up there on the windows, and has been empty for anywhere in the region of 18 years. So amongst that 560, Chair, there are several which are empty very long term. So in accordance with this strategy, I've given you 2 examples. Letters, I don't know what they're going to do. They engage with them, some of them. But when owners are not prepared to do anything, when do we carry out enforcement action?
If I can come in on that point. So the letters are an efficient way of engaging with 560 owners. It's impossible for us to go directly and have meetings with each of those. So some may not be aware of what support and advice is out there. So it is an efficient way of engaging those and to stop them from becoming these long-term problematic properties. As part of that engagement, we do send out a questionnaire as well, which allows us to risk assess each property, and we will take a proportion of those for each year that we will try and address. It does take a long time to take that enforcement. Taking a property off somebody's hands is quite a big step. And we don't always want the owner to take responsibility in the first instance before we get involved. But I appreciate it is a long process. Our hands are tied by the legislation. There's no rules that says that somebody must stop, make sure that their property is occupied, and we tend to get involved when they do become problematic. Yeah, so that's the position on it.
Thank you for that answer, Chair. And my understanding is that all authorities in Wales have now extra powers to deal with empty homes. I've got a copy of the summary of the legislation in my office at home. Can the officer tell me at what stage are we going to use that additional legislation, which is quite specific? And I would have thought that in the case of properties which have been empty many years, that we got a golden opportunity to enhance that and invoke that legislation. And why hasn't it been used so far?
Yeah, we do have the powers. The powers that we have are that you're referring to are in for sale procedure, the compulsory purchase orders, or empty dwelling management orders. We are at a stage now where we've identified 8 properties for those powers to be taken. So we're in the process now of serving the notices on them to get the charges on those buildings to enable us to take the enforced sale procedure forward. They're properties that we've tried the engagement. We've tried, some of them don't have owners. The owners have passed away a long time ago, and we've run out of finding anybody else to deal with the property or to take the property on. So that is what the enforced sale procedure will be used for.
Thanks. Also on the presentation, it refers to financial assistance, Chair. And that's empty home loans or availability of relevant grants. How often have we offered these grants or loans to owners? I wasn't aware that frankly that there was a home loan or a relevant grant. And what's the maximum that they can apply for?
We've had the houses to homes loans, which are interest-free loans available for empty property owners for a good number of years now, and we've had really good uptake on there. We have a certain allocation that comes from Welsh Government that we recycle a pot of loan monies from there. And I think at the moment that most of our money is out with people, and we're just waiting for that to come in before we can put it out again. Couple of years back, 2 years ago, we were involved in the Valleys Task Force scheme, which was a grant funding, which was available to empty property owners. And this is where the letters come into play. So when the letters are sent out, they inform people of this financial assistance in case they aren't available. But obviously, they only go to empty property owners. So it's not something that's advertised borough-wide. It's because they're specific to empty properties. So the grant scheme, the houses to homes loans are available for properties where the owner wishes to sell or to rent. And the Valleys Task Force grants were available for people who are going to reside in the property themselves, and there was a requirement for them to reside there for 5 years afterwards, and the loans are usually up to about between 25 and 35,000. Thanks.
Thank you. On the letters that has been mentioned, the recent engagement letters, when is there an end date for those letters? And when you've had the results back from the 560, I presume, letters you sent out, will we have that information then referred back to us in the Scrutiny Committee?
Well, as I mentioned earlier on, we monitor against the performance indicator for this on an annual basis. So in Q4, we'll look at, of those 560, how many were brought back into use.
So we'll have a report back to us as to what the uptake, of this engagement is at some time.
If requested, we can bring a further report if needed at a later time.
Okay, thank you.
Just one thing on that, the letters go out, they've always gone out every 2 years. They have done for the past sort of 12 years. They've been a bit delayed just because of COVID this year. But with those, the results of the letters that have gone out now may not even come, they may not bring properties back into use for another year or two, because obviously if somebody's asking for financial assistance now and they have a loan, then the time it takes to do that work may be sort of 12 months down the line, 18 months down the line. So some of the properties that are coming back into use now are property owners that I've engaged with two or 3 years ago, because things don't tend to move that quickly with them. It's a continuous engagement process with the owners of empty properties, and the letters are just to sort of revitalise that with new owners that may have come, or old ones that have sort of they've sort of come to hit a brick wall when they're doing their developments with the property.
Okay.
So it's-
Yeah, I think Paul wants to come in as well.
Yes, Councillor Jones, what I would suggest is if we build it into the forward plan, there's obviously an action plan that was part of the strategy that was adopted by Council back in February. And I think what we can do is revisit that action plan and any outcomes from the letter drop and perhaps report to Scrutiny in Q4.
Councillor Jones?
Is general question. I looked at the figures. Is 6% or thereabouts enough every year? I understand the amount of work that's involved, but to have this number of empty properties is something that we need to sort out, frankly.
We have a proportion of an officer that deals with this element of the work at the moment, and that is probably an ambitious target anyway.
Last question.
Yeah.
So if you've got part of an officer, clearly the amount of work involved here would require an officer full time on this. Because I can't see how we can keep up with the percentage at the moment that we've mentioned here, with an officer dealing with this part time.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Does anybody want to answer Clive's question there? Do you think it needs full-time support?
Can I come in there, Chair? Couple of things from me. Yes, it warrants a full-time post. Whether or not the local authority can actually afford that, obviously, when it comes to budget setting this year, then those are the questions that I think we've got to discuss and agree on where our relevant priorities are, and that obviously will be it'll be a decision of council where we place those resources. We have increased quite significantly the capacity in environmental health, as members will know, over the last 2.5 years. So we have acknowledged that the capacity needed to be raised. Just another couple of comments really after Councillor Jones's questions. I think it'd be worth Melissa sharing with the committee a copy of the most recent letter that went out to empty home owners, and you can really see there the comprehensive list of support that is offered to owners. And just a comment on the most recent Valleys Task Force Empty Homes Initiative. My professional opinion was that the majority of the people who accessed it and benefited from the grant would have spent the money anyway. So value to actually tackle some of the more difficult properties which you've highlighted, Councillor Jones. I think it was a bit of a blunt instrument.
Thanks, Alan. I believe there's some other funding available for landlords to bring properties back into being. Could that be shared with councillors as well?
it's included, well, yeah, we can include that, but obviously, as Melissa highlighted earlier, in some of the grant sources, there is the potential for people with empty houses to actually enter the private rented market, in schemes where obviously they give over their houses to be rented rather than rent them directly themselves, which is a barrier to some individuals because of the potential hassle involved.
Great. Thanks, Ali. Councillor Williams-Price?
Thank you. So one of my questions was actually whether all owners of long-term empty homes have been advised of the private rental leasing scheme. So I can take from that that they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more questions? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you go on.
I take mine off.
Thank you. So one of the things I've noted reading the empty home strategy was that it was noted that due to a change of council tax policy, there's anticipated that people have registered what were previously empty homes on a single occupancy basis, because that's the most favourable council tax position. What resource is allocated to identifying those properties and potentially dealing with it on an anti-fraud basis?
I don't think there's anybody here from council tax this evening, and it's part of the action plan moving forward. So can I suggest that maybe it's included in the report that we'll bring forward as part of the action plan reporting? It's at the end of the strategy.
Okay, thank you. And one further question. So you've set out, obviously, the levers available to you to bring empty homes back in use. What actions are taken, if any, to prevent houses becoming long-term empty properties?
Just to clarify, to prevent them becoming empty, is that the question?
As long-term empty. Yeah. Are there any precursors to them becoming long-term empty that we could identify and perhaps look to proactively combat?
But they become classed as long-term empty when they become 6 months empty. So we only become available aware of them when they are more than 6 months empty, because at any one time in the borough we've got about 1,200 empty properties. 600 of them are classed as transactional, where they're going through sales or they're in between tenants and things. So the list that's only relevant to us really is when they become more than 6 months, because otherwise we could be getting in touch with somebody who says, oh yeah, I've only moved out last week and I'm waiting for some food, things like that. So we only get the list at 6 months. So by the time they come to us, they're technically classed as long-term vacants for our purposes.
So you think any data you would receive before then would potentially be too extensive to be able to identify any trends?
Yeah, because there's, like I say, there's always about 1,200, but they're classed as transactional, so they're just in between sort of tenancies and things. So if we get in touch with those, there's a reason why they are vacant for short periods of time.
Okay, thank you.
If they're problematic, obviously we will receive complaints about those within that time, and hopefully, there will be potentially some enforcement on lower scale issues at that stage. But yeah, if they're transactional, then it's likely they're only temporarily empty.
Thank you. That's my questions. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Anna. Declan?
Thank you, Chair. I've got some questions, but to be honest, they don't have to be answered today. I'm just wondering if they can be put in the report when it comes back. Because to be honest, I've spoken to Melissa Clee, I think last week or the week before, in regards to a property in Dowlais, and she's working on it, so it would be unfair of me to ask her questions when she said the information will come back. But some of the questions I wouldn't mind in the report, being in the report. How many properties are engaging with yourselves following you sending out the letter, how many of those 500 properties basically are responding, how many of these properties are not paying council tax, and how much is owed to the local authority for repairs to these properties. Yeah, cheers. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Declan. Yeah, and maybe a table on how long they've been empty, sorry. You know, is there 60 that have been empty for 6 months to 12 months and, you know, 10 years plus and stuff like that? That would be really useful as well. Because I know a couple of properties in Councillor Jones's ward are long-term MDs as well. Is there any other questions? I got a couple. Out of the 568, how many are deemed unsafe? Would you know?
No, as building control would be, but we don't assess whether they're safe or not within environmental health. If there was
Okay.
any unsafe issues, they would be dealt with by building control.
Okay, thank you. On page 30, under engagement, states that you contact homeowners every 2 years. If they don't respond, is there any follow-up letters, or is it just wait for another 2 years before you contact them?
The purpose of the letter is to engage with people who want to engage with us really, or just need a helping hand to know where to go, to ask for some advice, to get financial assistance if they require it. So the letters, the purpose of the letters is to open up those lines of engagement with them, to enable them to come to us. So we've already got the enforcement things that we're doing with other properties that we know are not engaged, you know, problematic, that we're having public health issues with, such as rats. They're constantly being broken into, we're constantly securing them. So we've got those properties separate to the letters. So it's that's something separate that happens. That's the enforcement side of it. Even though they won't always end up in enforced sale or compulsory purchase, we are taking regular enforcement notices on those properties to deal with the rat infestation that's there, or to secure the property from unauthorized access, things like that.
Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned that if they don't, you send somebody a letter and maybe they're not at that property, and then another 2 years goes by before you send another letter. I didn't know whether you'd send a follow-up letter to say, look, we have written to you in the last, I don't know, 6 months. Please can you respond? In terms of, you just mentioned rodent infestation and fly tipping. What do we do in terms of the empty properties? If there are, I've seen houses with 20, 30 bags of rubbish in their gardens when they're empty, and then obviously that brings rats. What's our enforcement like with those properties?
You've raised several issues there, and there's several different tools legislatively that we can use to remedy that. But the first course of action would be to give an opportunity to that owner to address the issue, whatever it might be, whether it be waste there or a rat problem. Usually it's waste that will attract the rats. So it would be an informal approach. And then we've got Prevention of Damage by Pests Act, which we can ask them to remove that. Ultimately, if it's not done, we can undertake works in default and recover those costs, or put a charge against the property.
I know this is going to be a difficult one to answer, but how often does that happen? How often will you recharge somebody?
That's a continuous process really that the district officers deal with, and is probably one of our biggest complaints is waste in gardens and dealing with prevention damage by Pests Act notices. But it is a constant stream really of doing works in default. Some of the empty properties, we've got charges on them where we've cleared the gardens, and that's a tool that we can use to enforce the sale if the owner won't come on board with us to sort of take action to bring the property back into use themselves.
Okay, thank you. My last question is around CPOs and EDMOs. How many are carried out in the last year? If you haven't got that information, could you maybe get it to us maybe in the last 5 years?
We haven't taken any CPOs or EDMOs because of the complications around using those process and the potential costs, additional costs to the local authorities. It's not something that we're using at the moment.
Would you know when the last one might have taken place, or it's something we've never done?
Yeah, we've used the power limit for sale, and the last one that we did there was about three years ago.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Councillor Salmon?
Thank you, Chair. Melissa, as well, in relation to the Chair's question, when you bring your report back to either this committee or full council, can you, his question was how many properties are unsafe? Would you be able to liaise with the Building Control Department, you know, to include that information in your report? And also, would it be possible to include in that report on how many visits environmental health officers have to make to those properties, you know, for enforcement as well, please? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we can get the data on unsafe properties. It might be a bit more difficult to actually focus on empty properties and visits, because visits could be in relation to fly tipping, well, and all the other issues that you've mentioned. It may be difficult to run a report on that, but we'll try our best to do that as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Just picking up on something Councillor Jones said earlier about properties which have been empty for 25, 30 years plus. Do we have anything in place so we can put like an extra fine on people who don't bring these properties back? Because obviously they got no intentions of bringing them back if they've been empty for so long. Do we have anything in place for that?
I mean, they come to our attention because they're causing all of these other issues. If they're not causing these issues, we have no power to make somebody make sure that they're occupied. I suppose there are some leverage within the council tax regimes, which I'm not an expert on.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. Because why I asked, because I'll be sending an email when I get home tonight now with a ongoing property in the town ward. I've had the resident come on to me again today. The state of the place is unbelievable. And we've been dealing with this. I've been a councillor 5 years plus. And every sort of twice a year we bring in it. Fair play to the Environmental Health Department. They go down, they sort it out. But then it's just left to go again. This is why I was asking the question, if we could penalise them even more, you know, just to make them bring them back into use.
Do a property and we can have a look at it.
Thanks, John. Yeah, no problem. Any more questions? Yeah. Any comments? Yeah. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I think it's been great questions asked to you today, to the officers. You're right, empty homes is a blight in our borough, and we have 560 of them. And when you think we are now currently in a housing crisis, you know, we haven't got a void, I believe, at this moment, in our region, in our RSL stock. So the sooner, you know, we can get houses back into use, the better. I know I've spoke to Alan about it on some of the grants that's available, and as he said in the meeting earlier, that if he feels that the last one that was made available was a blunt tool. And I think our challenge is to speak to Welsh Government to get a better grant so we can use going forward to bring these empty properties back into use.
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. This, of all the problems that councillors make, is probably one of the most frustrating of them all, without any shadow of doubt. I've referred to at least 2 in my ward. And I can give you, I've got a whole host of emails going back years, 18 years in the case of one of them. And in view of what more information I've had today, I'll be writing to the relevant officers about these properties again. But we really do need to get on with them and sort out, particularly, Chair, the ones that, you know, I mentioned, and any one of the other 29 councillors can refer to cases that have been going on years. So we do need to deal with, in my view, particularly ones that have been outstanding at the longest and are causing issues with officers' time, etc. So that's all I need to say at this stage. But I found what we've got today, and Councillor Thomas is quite right. There's been some very good questions and some very interesting answers. But as far as the forward work programme, I think we want to keep this uppermost in our minds. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks, Councillor Jones. Councillor Anna Williams-Price.
Thank you. Just like to say thank you to the officers for providing the information, because I appreciate it's quite a difficult issue and quite a complex one, and all the information you provided today has been greatly received. Apologies, I was wondering whether it'd be possible just to ask clarification of Councillor Thomas on a point he made.
Yeah, by all means.
So, did you mention that you want to request bigger grants for properties from Welsh Government?
Yeah, Councillor Thomas.
No, not bigger grants, but better grants. Better grants, which gives more clarity on what they can be used upon. As Alan alluded to when he spoke earlier, the last grant that came for empty homes property was a blunt instrument. You know, when you're talking to bring 560 houses back into use, we will need a lot more money. A lot more money needs to be in that pool, and perhaps we can direct it better as well with some revenue resource for the local authority, perhaps, that we can employ staff to help us on that journey. Sorry, I'm looking over these slides.
It's really difficult. Does that answer your question?
Good. Yeah, thank you. So your point is that there needs to be more resource coming into, for example, the Environmental Health Department, rather than going directly to owners of empty homes.
I would say, but both really. It's both got to be there. I think we'll have some interesting discussions when we come to budget setting this year of where, perhaps where we want to put our money, if it's into different areas for different members of staff. I think, that's going to be part of our discussions, but it does come down to, it needs more money because someone has to pay for these homes to come into use. And I would have felt like if these people have got the money, they would have done it already. They're just sitting on properties because they haven't got the money to do it themselves in a lot of the cases.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me that one, Jay. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Got a comment from Hilary.
Yes, thank you. Apologies, I put something in the chat bar, not realising that you couldn't see the chat. I simply wanted to echo some of the questions, comments that have been made regarding requests that we have more information on the 568 empty homes, a table or matrix if possible, please, so that the scale of the matter can be seen not just in terms of total numbers. So I think won't revisit everything that's mentioned, but environmental interventions, etc., number of non-engagements and everything else that's been mentioned. I think that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thanks, Hilary. More comments? No? Okay. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to move on to part two. Yep. Part two of agenda item 4. I'd like to ask Councillor Thomas to present this, please. You? Or do you want me to pass it to Alan?
No, thank you, Chair. Obviously, we're going to go on now to some of the long-term empty heritage historical properties that's given us a challenge throughout the borough. I know that Councillor Jones on the committee very interested in a few of them, which are in his ward, and we've held a few meetings on them. I think we all agree that we'd love these properties to be back into use as soon as possible, but we are finding it challenging, and in particular in the current financial climate that we're in. And I know that Zoe Thomas and Alan Owen are going to explain a little bit more about the problems that we are facing. So if I can hand you over to Alan Owen, our Deputy Chief Executive, to take it from you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thomas. What we're going to do, obviously, we produced the handout which the Scrutiny Committee has, which features the highest profile derelict long-term empty properties, which are predominantly in the town centre, on the periphery of the town centre. What I suggest, if Zoe just runs through the properties themselves, they're all very well known to everyone in this room, and then we can either pick up individual queries or some general issues in relation to this type of physical regeneration, what we've achieved previously, and some of the barriers and obstacles which we still face.
Thanks, Al. Afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to, as Alan said, quickly just run through the presentation. What I've tried to identify within the first slide are the key opportunities and weaknesses associated with these buildings. Just to echo what Alan just said, really, these are long-term vacant properties within the town centre that we have had a number of attempts to try and regenerate through a number of different regeneration programs. I think the previous program, the Vibrant and Viable Places program, identified a lot of these properties for redevelopment, but I think we've moved on quite a bit with a lot of them now in the past 3 to 5 years. But in terms of the current opportunities that we have with these properties, they've been identified for regeneration within our town centre placemaking plan, which highlights the importance of these buildings to Welsh Government in order to help us try and secure funding to regenerate these buildings. Leads into the second point, the funding availability for the regeneration of buildings. So the Transforming Towns programme focuses on key developments within town centres. So we've got an opportunity to apply for funding through that programme, and of course other external funding streams such as the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which targets these heritage buildings with long-term sustainable uses as well. Again, over the past few years, we've managed to build relationships with a lot of the owners. So that allows those conversations around the opportunities for these buildings. And we have the commitment of the owners to consider proposals for future developments as well. For some buildings, which I'll come on to talk about, we've also managed to create feasibility studies, and as you can appreciate, there's a lot of interest in these buildings from key stakeholders, not just sort of local stakeholders, but organisations such as CADO as well, which help us in terms of building these applications for support from external funders. But even though there are a lot of opportunities, as you can appreciate, there are also a lot of weaknesses at the same time that we're facing. One of our biggest problems, we have a large number of Grade 2 listed buildings within the town centre, and there is a significant level of finance required to regenerate each property. And obviously within the current climate, we're facing additional issues with finances as well around inflation, material costs, energy increases, which is having an impact on budgets. And we're already facing difficulties in relation to the amount of finance available from organisations such as Welsh Government, National Lottery Heritage Fund. Also, within some instances as well, there are absent building owners, which is difficult for us to progress any potential plans with buildings. And something that we're really finding at the moment on larger scale buildings, but also other development opportunities within the town centre, the private finance for the developers to commit isn't always necessarily there. And one change we really found within Welsh Government over the past few years, in the Vibrant and Viable Places programme as an example, you could probably look to get much higher levels of grant funding. you could look for up to between 80 and 100% grant finance. These programs now, you're looking at an intervention rate from the developer, but from a Welsh Government grant perspective, they're looking at a grant loan split, which puts more onus then onto the developer in terms of repayable finance, which again isn't a huge incentive to take these buildings forward when they're going to cost a considerable amount to redevelop. It's also fairly difficult to identify sustainable end uses for all properties. And the landscape has now changed following the pandemic. Previously, particularly within the master plan, because that was approved prior to the pandemic as well, office space was always something that was looked at as an end use, something that's perhaps not considered something that's required within town centres within the past 3 years. So again, it's looking at something that is going to be sustainable, and that we're not going to create a white elephant within the town centre, really. And yeah, it's the managing aspirations of owners. As you can probably appreciate, Regeneration have a lot of contact from the owners, and it's not always a straightforward path to taking a scheme forward. So that's the opportunities and weaknesses. I won't go through the detail of every building. I'll just sort of give a snapshot of where we are at this current point in time, really. All of the history in terms of each development has been highlighted within the presentation. So in terms of the General Hospital, this is a long-term vacant property within the town centre that I know many stakeholders would like to see regenerated. That's recently been purchased by a new owner, so we're in contact with them looking at potential housing for the site. They've done a lot of work now around site clearance and vegetation removal, and we're just going through the next stages in terms of the early development on that. Theatre Royal, slightly more difficult in terms of the fact that this has changed ownership fairly frequently in the past few years. So we now engaged with the more recent owner. The building was recently sold at auction. We've recently secured funding for an options appraisal and structural survey through Welsh Government. So we're now in the stage of sharing that detail with the new owner to look at what potential opportunities there are for the building, what their aspirations are, in order to look at how we can potentially support with moving that building forward. The YMCA. So in a bit of a different position with this, in the fact that we've progressed in terms of appointing a contractor on site. Some emergency works have been undertaken, and we're now in the sort of throes of delivery in relation to the YMCA. St Hilda's housing site. Part of this building is listed, but I appreciate, we wanted to include this within the presentation because it is a long-term vacant site which has high levels of antisocial behaviour, and I know it's something that the local residents are really keen to see redeveloped. So the current proposal is the creation of 70 homes, a mix of market and affordable, and again we're just trying to finalise the plans with the developer and funders at this point. And the next stage of work, once we've got all of those plans in place, will be the remediation of the site in order to progress with any capital works. The synagogue, again, another long-term vacant building which has huge levels of antisocial behaviour, or had. The building has now been purchased by the Foundation for Jewish Heritage. They've undertaken urgent repairs on the site, and also they've managed to secure that site. So I don't believe that causes as many issues as it previously did at this point in time. So the proposal, the aspiration from the foundation is to create a museum for Jewish heritage. So they've secured development funding now through Welsh Government and National Lottery Heritage Fund in order to take those plans forward. We're looking at a 2-year development period, which is very common with the Heritage Fund. And following on from that, we look to support them with applications for larger scale redevelopment. And the Miners Hall, this is again a long-term vacant site, slightly more difficult in the fact that the owner is absent. And at this point, there are no current plans for redevelopment of this property, as our focus has been on the previous properties that have been highlighted within the presentation, but not to say, you know, it's something that we will look to progress with in the short to medium term. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. How I'd like to do this is go through each building one at a time, so ask questions about. So we'll start with General Hospital and then we'll do overall comments at the end then. So questions on General Hospital? Councillor Jones?
Excuse me, sort of with a smile on my face, because one of the members, been dealing with this for the last 18 years. The current owner who purchased the building, I understand, over a year ago, things had started to progress slowly. But what I couldn't understand, and this is the basis of my question, as a result of the site meeting, and we had the owner, 2 of his development team, plus 3 senior officers there. It wasn't until that site meeting took place that things appeared to have started to move. So in my book, if we hadn't had the site meeting and subsequently an internal meeting here, we included Councillor Geraint Thomas, the leader, Chief Executive, Deputy Chief Executive, Zoe, and other officers. So this building has been empty 20 years, 3 different owners, and it wasn't until we had a recent site meeting that, as a result of that, it appears things started moving. And what, based on my question is, why did it take a site meeting to start? I mean, the new owner bought the building a year ago. We all know the history of what happened there, countless complaints. So when we have something like this, why don't we ask to meet the new owner immediately and discuss with them what the potential for the future development?
Yeah, if I can come back there, that is standard procedure of what we actually do. These individuals are private owners. They don't have to come and meet with the local authority. These private owners put in place their own technical teams. Some are very good, some are very bad, and some are very difficult to engage with. The property that you're talking about, Councillor Jones, it was only when the owner actually changed his technical team that we saw the scheme starting to become more positive.
I don't know. Councillor Jones, you want to come back in?
Well, I'll be going into a comment then.
All right.
Well, thanks for that. But here we go. It's a bit frustrating. Things didn't start moving, i.e., doing extra work and the fencing around there, until we'd had the site meeting.
Thank you.
And I confirm that he told us on the site meeting he had the original 2 of the development team, basically did nothing, took his money and disappeared.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Any more questions around the hospital? I have a couple. You know, it says in the presentation about discussing with RSLs. How does this happen if we're not the owners of the building? Is that we just linking them as a partnership?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. We don't have unilateral discussions. It's with the relevant owners who, if they express a desire to look at the housing development, that is one route available.
Thanks, Ali. Councillor Jones?
Sorry, we just triggered off a question in my mind. Have we actually identified a registered social landlord now, or are we still in the throes of discussions?
Potentially. We've now met with the technical team, myself and the, strategic housing manager. So the developer and the technical team identified a potential RSL. So we're awaiting the outcome of that conversation. So we're hoping by the end of the month now we'll be able to regroup with them. And should they wish to continue working with the developer on that site, myself and the housing manager will re-engage and start to take that forward and look at any potential funding opportunities to support that as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, obviously, because we're working with well, in effect, commercial developers. In some instances, the issues of commercial confidentiality in discussing, obviously, some of these projects in a public meeting.
Thanks, both. Clive, do you want to come back in, sir?
No, thank you for the up-to-date information. Thanks.
Thank you.
We've got, Councillor Thomas knows, we've had one meeting with a number of senior officers in July. We've got another one planned on the 24th. And hopefully Zoe and Alan will be there and Chief Executive to see what progress has been made.
No problem. Councillor Williams-Price?
Thank you. So if the discussions with the registered social landlord come to fruition, would it then be a mix of private and social housing, such as in the St Ives development, or was the intention that it would be purely run by social registered landlords? And if it's a mix, is there a minimum amount of properties that would need to be allocated to the social side?
Yeah, it's impossible to surmise on that yet. There's too many factors left to discuss.
Thank you.
Thank you. I got one last question, and it's going to be a theme throughout, so I'll only ask you the once. When properties go up for auction, do we ever consider purchasing them ourselves? And if we don't, why don't we?
Because we'd have to be really certain of the after use, and in most instances, the local authority would be buying a liability, which we wouldn't have planned capital or revenue to actually service. You know, there's no pot of money that the regeneration department keep for just in case a nice building comes up.
Yeah, I'm guessing the funding's available to external partners, but it's not to the local authority, I guess, as well, is it?
Obviously, from a private sector perspective, then it's private sector funding.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions for the hospital, we'll move on to Theatre Royal. Any questions? Councillor Clive Jones?
Yes, this has been mentioned, I think by Zoe, that there's been several owners here, and that creates a problem, particularly when they're listed as well, these buildings. It's been purchased recently, so when they bought it in auction, are you telling us that these new owners haven't got a clue what they buy in and what they intend it to be used for?
I think it'd be difficult for us to actually surmise that without having the owner, your Councillor Jones.
Well, it's, I think, fairly common knowledge that they purchased this for very little.
Put your microphone on,
Oh, so
Councillor Jones.
well, it's common knowledge that they purchased it for very little. Clearly, the value of the building has decreased. I understand the inside is in a dreadful state. But it appears to me, unless somebody corrects me, that they put their hands up at a particular price, buy it, and then it's a case of scratching their heads as to what they're going to do with it. So we then come in, Chair, by the sound of it, and we obtained funding for an option appraisal. So at the end of that, whatever comes out of the option appraisal, the suggestions then, I presume, are put to the new owners, and it's for them to decide where they go from there. Is that correct?
Well, this is slightly, the timing is slightly different. The previous owner carried out the option appraisal, but obviously ended up selling the property. So an option appraisal exists, which we secured funded for the previous owner.
So do we know as officers whether the new owners are happy with what's in that option appraisal, which the council's office gone to the trouble of obtaining this funding? Have we sat down and said to them, well, there's the option appraisal. What's your views?
We're in discussions with the new owners, but obviously we, I don't think we can take a view on their view.
So I haven't seen, I don't know if many members have seen the option appraisal. I don't know if many members have seen the option appraisal, but what were the suggestions for the use of this building?
All options were discovered, were actually, all options were actually explored. I don't think for commercial confidentiality, I can speak about that here, Councillor Jones, because it was commissioned specifically in partnership with the previous owner.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Just add to that, Al. But the previous owner has, I believe, has agreed to share that with the new owners. So hopefully that can progress their thinking. I believe they are in discussion and we haven't re-engaged them yet, but that could progress their thinking as to what their aspirations are for the future use of the property as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. The new owner purchased not too long ago, really, wasn't it? And they came in, they were like a bull at the gate. They started clearing the place out and everything, and all of a sudden it just came to a complete stop. Is there any reason why it's come to a stop or a halt?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't know. And this is this is the issue, isn't it? Because obviously these buildings are of great interest to us from a regeneration perspective, to yourselves as councillors and to the residents of Merthyr, but we don't own them. So obviously, you know, we can't speak for the owners.
Thank you. Any more questions? I just have a couple. Do the owners have any ideas? Are they mulling over a number of ideas, or do they have a clear vision of what they want to do with the building?
Again, I really don't think that we're in a
Okay.
position to answer that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, it's pointless me asking my other one as well then. Right, so if there's no more questions on Theatre Royale, we'll move on to YMCA. Alan, did you want to say anything before we talk about, is it certain things we can't discuss?
We brought an exempt information report to the
Committee.
September committee, with advice that we will be bringing a full report on an update and the revised cost profile for the development of this building to the November.
Yeah, we
meeting.
said November committee, but I think it is likely to be a December committee. But yeah, there will be a report coming back this calendar year.
Will that be exempt then?
It will,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay, I'm guessing there'll be some things you can't answer, but we'll have a go. Questions on Clive?
Yes. I don't know whether everybody heard your last answer, because I don't think your microphone was on, Zoe. But is there any reason why this situation with the YMCA is now been, because we were told we definitely come into the November meeting. I think I was one of those who asked the question. So why has this been delayed a further month?
Apologies. Solely because we want to ensure that we have all the relevant information and readiness to bring to full council in order to be able to answer all queries on the building. I think when we brought the report in September, we may have been slightly ambitious in terms of thinking that we'd have all the relevant, particularly cost information by mid-October, because of course with the process, if it needed to go onto the drive 2 weeks before, it wouldn't have allowed us time to prepare all of that information with our architects and the contractors. So allowing that additional month will give us that time to prepare all the relevant information then, councillor.
I should know this, but I'm unsure, and this is why I'm asking. Has the work paused on it? Are they still continuing to do what they should be doing there
Yes.
throughout every working day?
Yeah, at this point, the contractors are still on site. Hopefully you've been able to see them still on site. We have not requested any work to cease at this point in time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Right, we'll move on. St. Tidwell's housing. Any questions? Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, with this site, both as you alluded to earlier on, Zoe, the antisocial behaviour we were having there is, and Paul, will know we're on the phone all the time to Paul. Every week we get, as locally elected members, we get in calls. Is there any timescale of actually when this is going to start, do you know? Because it is getting a bit of a bugbear now for the residents up there.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, but unfortunately not. Again, with this being a private site, it's completely in the control of the developer at this point. But yeah, I appreciate that there are a lot of reports coming into Paul's team and environmental health. But again, we can try and push that emphasis on needing the site to be secure with the developer to try and reinforce the importance of trying to prevent any of that ASB on the site. But in terms of timescales, there's still unknown at this point. We are trying to push it, but it's in their hands effectively.
Yeah, thanks for that as well. Is it still Jarvis, the main guy in charge here, or has that been moved on to somebody else again?
Yeah, there are multiple sort of owners of the site, which we'll share all of the detail with. So whatever reports we get in, we can forward that on to relevant, to both contacts for the site then. We're happy to share that detail offline with you again, councillor, if you want to send your own emails into the developer as well as us from the Regeneration team.
Great, that'd be great. Thanks all.
Thank you. Al, do you want to come in? Or... I see you had your microphone on too. All right, bro. Okay. Any further questions? No. Okay, we'll move on. Synagogue. Next. Yeah, any questions on the synagogue? Councillor Clive Jones?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We're all delighted when the Foundation for the Jewish Heritage Group bought this building in 2019. And I know there's been work done externally and a certain amount, I think, internally already. But you mentioned, Zoe, that there's a 2-year development. So currently, what has been done to progress this? Do we have any idea what the start date will be, and exactly what the end date will be? I mean, I happen to think that this is an ideal usage for this significant building in the town centre. So are you able to answer that particular question?
Of course. So technically now the development period has started. They've secured all of the funding. But as I said within my overview at the start, it's very common to have an 18-month to 2-year development period from a National Lottery Heritage funded project. So that will entail a number of elements of work in order to progress to a stage 2, which is an application for the main capital works. So what they look to do now, the foundation, over the next 18 to 24 months, will be to have robust documentation in place, such as the business plan to ensure the long-term sustainable uses is feasible. They look at creating or undertaking, all of the relevant survey work, etc., which will lead on to all of the tender development as well. Also, as part of the HLF development phase, they'll need to create something which is called an activity plan. So they'll have to look at, what marketing, communication, voluntary sector and local stakeholder engagement they'll need to undertake during this phase and the delivery phase as well. So there's a significant amount of work that needs to be undertaken within the next 18 months. I'm happy to share some of that offline in more detail should you wish, just to give that more comprehensive list as to exactly what the requirements of a stage 1 application for a stage 2 development application for HLF entails.
So that I'm crystal clear on this, it's 3 years since the building was purchased. I presume work has been going on between everyone to get to this development stage. No physical work will be done in the building, internally and externally, possibly for another 2 years. And I can see you nodding your head. So when it does start, do we know at this stage how long it's going to take? The reason I ask this question is that I think everybody was delighted when this building was purchased, because there'd been, again, several owners left to deteriorate. They've come along, definitely the right group to deal with this. But I don't think the public really are aware of all the facts behind this, that from the time of purchase to the time this building is usage, there's a very long time span. So am I right in saying that this 18-month to 2-year development plan then is going to be built in how long it's going to take? So at this stage, have we got any idea what time this decade they tend to start the work?
No, we haven't, because it'll be dependent on the redevelopment plans that they put in place and how long the build time to build out those plans are. And I think you make a very valid point, Councillor Jones, that dealing with these developments takes, it takes an awful long time. And I can understand that the public, well, we all get frustrated because obviously, we've worked with the foundation for 5 years now. Yeah. And a lot
Yeah.
of that work goes on behind the scenes. It's the same as everything we do with some of the developers and developments that we're discussing. It takes an awful lot of time, and it takes a substantial amount of staff capacity as well. But unfortunately, that's not seen. But realistically, when they submit the Part 2 application, then we'd be able to have some sort of technical idea based on the design build that they're going forward with.
Councillor Jones?
So we get in more information, well, at least certainly I am today, up to date information. What's the intention of the office as to how to keep councillors updated as to where we are with this, and perhaps other buildings that are taking time? From what I see of it, perhaps we need to have a progress report of where we are, what the difficulties officers have come up against, or the owners, so that this information is spread out far and wide and people get more understanding of the difficulties that are being faced.
We'd happy to use this scrutiny committee as a means of a regular update report, Chair.
Yeah, happy to do so. Yeah. Councillor Williams-Price?
Thank you. I was just going to recommend, in addition to those comments and how the officers could keep us updated, I'm conscious that when we originally set this agenda item in the forward work plan, was the intention that owners of these properties would be invited. And I think, as Alan has demonstrated, that would be beneficial because obviously they're able to share information with us that they feel is appropriate, and may be willing to provide more insight than the officers are understandably able to.
Yeah, I think a workshop would probably be better than a public meeting. Is that something that you could arrange?
Yeah, we could definitely give an invite to a small workshop, but I tend to agree with you, Chair. A public meeting probably wouldn't be the place for owners of these buildings to have a free and open conversation.
Do you want to come back in?
Only to say I'm more than happy to be flexible on the format. I'm just conscious that, those are the people that would be useful for us to speak to.
Great. And if you have any site meetings that, if an invite could come to us that we could attend, that would be great as well. Well, any more questions? No? All right, we'll move on to last but no means least, mine as well. Sure, Councillor Jones, would like to speak on this one. Well,
Well, where do you start? This is, talk about frustration. This is top of the table as far as all of these buildings are concerned. And again, I think it's tapping on for in the region of 30 years since this building has been and not used. There's been, I think, at least 2 fires there over the years. It says in here, feasibility study to identify future potential uses undertaken in 2015. Be very interesting to see what that was if we're able to. But what I don't understand is that I think it was said earlier on that in relation to there's an absent owner. Now, my understanding was that this building was still owned by a member of a family that owned an hotel in the county borough some years ago, and that person is still alive and kicking, living in Scotland. So can you clear that one up for a start? So if the person doesn't respond to constant representations from council officers, what course have we got open to us?
I suppose the ultimate course available to us in this instance is CPO, although obviously there are legal complications with that process. To run a successful CPO, as you're probably aware, you have to have a use for the or a reuse or a use for either the land or the building, and can demonstrate that the finance is in place to actually deliver that alternative use. And at this point in time, that's something that we do not have with this building, and we also do not have the capacity to do it.
So can you answer the other part of my question was, it was said this is an absent owner. Is that a fact? It's an absent owner. You know the owner, but the owner is not responding. Is that the case?
Sorry, yes, absent from the perspective that we do not have engagement with this owner at the current point in time, as we do with all of the buildings that we've discussed at committee this afternoon.
But in this particular case, I think this must be the longest outstanding vacant listed building in the county borough, as far as I know. It's bang in the town centre. I would have thought this is part of the 15-year town centre plan. It's a complete and total eyesore. So, as I said, I haven't seen the feasibility study. Maybe that's gone by the board. That's 7 years old. So, what are the plans as far as we are concerned? If you're getting no response, because this can go on for decades, what are the actual definite things, the buttons that being pressed to get the thing moving?
In the Vibrant and Viable Places programme, we did engage with an RSL because quite probably the only viable alternative use for that particular land would be a housing scheme. But we have not had the capacity to revisit those discussions and those proposals since for financial reasons and capacity reasons.
So we're not doing anything dealing with this as officers at all, essentially because of the financial situation and the fact that we don't know if it's an absent owner. It means to me the owner's there, but he's totally ignoring us, and that can't be right. What steps can we take to deal with that owner, who I understand part of the family, same owners for the last 30 years, and they're sitting back somewhere in the United Kingdom and laughing at us?
Can I suggest, Chair, that we take this discussion offline because it needs to be wrapped up in a discussion about what are the council's priorities within this particular landscape which we're discussing today, because we can't do everything, we can't afford everything, and we haven't got the capacity to do everything. So I think in the next round and next phase of our town centre master planning, which will take us into the fourth phase, I think these are the discussions that we need to have as a council.
Okay. Councillor George, you want to come back in?
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. But in the case of, for example, this is a listed building. I would have thought that groups like CADU and the Heritage Lottery are interested in a building of this type. So we may not have all the finances available, but they do in many cases. But it's a case of getting this resolved, I think, by the sound of it, with the owner before we go any further. But what I'm saying, Chair, is the length of time that this building has been empty, I don't think it can be allowed to continue like that, because it's a complete and utter eyesore.
Yeah, you made me feel really old. I mean, do go into Charbonniers when I was younger, so yeah, I do agree. It's gone on for too long. My bigger can you just clarify? Is it listed? It doesn't say that in.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's grade 2 listed.
Okay, great.
Well, the facade is, it's what's left.
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned. It does look unsafe. We've got trees growing out to the front of it, and obviously it's you know it's a main road right through, and lots of foot traffic, and it's right next to the pavement as well. I'd be seriously concerned with that facade coming down. I don't know if it is listed. What have we done any remedial work to make it safe?
Yeah, we've had several structural surveys on the facade, and it's not unsafe.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, one thing I forgot to ask. There was the, want of a better word, the Miners Public House, which was attached to it at the side, the rear end. Is that, that's not derelict, is it, at the moment, or am I wrong?
No, as part of the developments that we or the direction and development in the VVP program, we granted a local RSL to purchase that property as part of an eye on the longer term development.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay, moving on. Comments? Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the fact that we're going to have a workshop so we can discuss this further, and that we'll, as a scrutiny committee, have further updates, because I think that they are needed. We get complaint, all of us on the council get from time to time complaints about these various buildings, but there's no other word for it. Several of them are local eyesores, and the ones we're talking about here all happen to be in the town centre area, and unfortunately 2 of them are in my ward. But I'm pleased that we've had this discussion today. Again, I don't think we should take our eye off the ball with all of this. I hear what Alan Owen is saying about the financial aspects here, and clearly we don't want to take over a building which we could see quite clearly from the naked eye is a liability to us. But what I tried to intimate in my question, and what I'm saying now, is that we need to see what can be done to identify all the problems and do our utmost to progress them. We have forever been asked, again, by members of the public, what's happening to the Miners' Hall, what's happening to the Old General Hospital, what's happening to the Theatre Royal. And we need to be armed with all the facts. And the communications perhaps should go wider than that from the council out there to the public to highlight particular problems that Zoe and Alan have listed here this afternoon. I know it's a difficult subject, particularly when you're dealing with private owners, but you have to try and do what we can in various circumstances.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Any further comments? Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. What I felt in this room today is a big feeling of frustration, you know, on the time it takes to get buildings back into use. I think we've got to appreciate we've gone through a pandemic as well, which hasn't helped matters over the last 2 to 3 years. But I think it will be good to have in a report going forward a kind of timeline, you know, from the purchase or the start of a development to the completion and how long it really takes, especially for a public building, because there's one hell of a process to go through to get the right type of grant funding along that journey, Chair. We talked about here, you know, 6 buildings close to the town centre, and I would say 6 of the most prominent buildings in Wales. I think in Merthyr Tydfil we are weighted with heritage. We have a lot, you know. I don't think we may be the smallest borough in Wales, but there's nowhere else I've got that wealth of historical architecture that we have, and it's something for us to be proud of. But by God, it takes a lot to take care of as well, and I think we really need to appreciate that. Every one of those 6 buildings we spoke about today has got a special place in my heart, and I'd like to see them all developed. We've currently got 2 really underway at the moment with the YMCA and the synagogue, and I've spoken recently to Michael Mail, the gentleman that's running the project, and he's keen as mustard really to get it completed, and the whole Jewish community are fully behind it, so I'm looking forward to that. But like you said, Councillor Jones, it could take a couple of years, but when it's done, it's going to be something for us all to be proud of. So, you know, I just thank everyone for their patience, really. You know, it's been a learning curve for me as the cabinet member for Regeneration of the journey that we're on. But I think we've just got to, you know, fight our battles one at a time, get them done, and then move on to the next. And I think what we've also have got to speak to our public sector partners about is their responsibility for their buildings as well. And I'm going to make a comment now regarding the reservoirs and the water treatment works. If the new water treatment works comes to fruition on the Gurners Farm site, what are Welsh Water going to do with those fantastic buildings at Ponstycyth and Cloynon? And I think that needs to be in the planning application, the process, so it's not left for us to pick up the pieces in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. I don't want to follow that one. Yeah, any further comments? No? Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. You know, it might sound like we're really frustrated, but we are with you, I promise. And if there's anything we can do to support you, just please ask. I'd like to thank you all for coming. You're more than welcome to leave now, officers. Or you can stay.
Thank you, Chair.
No worries. Nice to see you all. Right. Take care. All. Yeah, take care. Right, okay. Moving on. Agenda item 5, scrutiny referrals. I haven't had any. No. And okay. Moving on. Item agenda 6, report recommendations. Did we address the recommendations in each report, and how have we added value? There wasn't any recommendations as such. There was one in the forward work programme that I didn't read out, but we'll skirt over that one. Does everybody feel like we added value to this meeting? Was it worth the report come in and asking questions? Councillor Clive Jones.
Well, I think so, definitely. Particularly, well, both of them. The vacant domestic properties and these last group of empty buildings, all listed, all come with their individual issues. As I said, I know it's frustrating to us all. It must be probably even more frustrating to officers dealing with this day in, day out. But I think we've done the right thing in bringing these items to the scrutiny meeting and asking particularly pertinent questions and getting the answers. I look forward to the workshop that we are going to have at some time, Chair.
Yeah. I
hope that we can all zoom in on a date when we can all be there, including, co-opted members, and let's see where we go from there. But both of them, I don't think we should leave this very long before we get reports coming back about both, particularly the empty property houses. What wasn't in these figures is that there are other empty properties on top of the 568. For example, we got holiday homes, believe it or not, throughout the county borough, and they are listed in this. So the total of properties that are vacant for one reason or another, and it includes people who are in residential care, so that they're in care, they don't want to sell their properties, but the properties are not used, are vacant. We've got there's about 950, 960 of them. So there are houses that are empty, but you can't particularly deal with them apart from these 568. But we need to keep on with this. In this day and age, it is ludicrous to have empty houses vacant for 15, 20, 25, 30 years plus. It should not be happening. And I think they particularly need to concentrate on the ones that they know. They've got them, they've had the complaints, members of the public, councillors for years. They need to deal with the ones, in my view, that have been outstanding the longest. Tried to make the point, but whether that's got home to them,
I totally agree. 20 to 30 years for empty is just not good enough. They're an eyesore, and obviously they're a breeding ground for fly tipping as well, and whatever else as well. So,
what I'll do is that I'll be writing to them about one in particular, the one that's 30 years old, again this week, and I'll copy you in.
Please do.
See what the reply is.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just saying, what Councillor Jones was saying about the empty property. That's why I brought it up. Surely, if they've been empty for like 20 years plus, there should be another penalty or something they should be putting on these people. There's got to be a way of doing something to bring those properties back. Because there's one up by me, he's been empty 35 years, right? I know the person who owns it. I've spoken to him. He said, I don't need the money. Why should I bring it back? You know, and he's a businessman.
I just, yeah,
You know, and it's just, it beats me. I said, if you're losing like £700 a month for argument's sake,
yeah,
you know, renting it out, well, I don't need the money. He said, it's my property.
just give it away.
You know,
Just give it to somebody who needs
it's
it.
there for my child. If they want it, they can have it. You know, that's his attitude. And, you know, there's got to be something they can do to stop this.
Yeah,
You know, all right, the 12 months, 2 years where they saying it changing, letting different people in, whatever. Okay, that's fair enough. But not the 20 years plus.
oh, I agree.
You know, that's ridiculous.
I do agree. We need to move quickly on this. We have got a full forward work program, but we'll get a workshop together for this and sit around the table and you know, especially around the houses. Yeah, especially with our housing crisis. So okay.
Just to, on the listed buildings when they're, you know, we know the YMCA and the synagogue are now in hands and work is getting on. But the likes of the theatre, the General Hospital and the St Hilda's site, Charbonniers, well, I don't know what we can do with that, Charbonniers, I don't know. But the others, I think our regen team have got to keep up the momentum and keep on to these people who have already purchased now and who said they're going to develop, rather than perhaps 12 months down the line who say, oh, St Hilda's is always being bought by somebody else, or the General Hospital is going again to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, keep up the momentum and keep on to them, and their expertise, get it in there so they can develop them.
I just thinking,
You know,
then,
especially with the funding side of it.
maybe we can ask for a quarterly update, like a memo or whatever, or even a monthly one of like, even if it's a couple of paragraphs on each one, what is happening,
Yeah.
what has changed.
Update. Yeah, just an update, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that. No worries. Okay. So, okay, does everybody agree? We added value though, yeah? Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Agenda item 7, feedback on scrutiny activities, any outstanding actions, feedback from workshops. I don't have any at the moment. No, none. Neil?
Just about the progress with the public transport item we were going to bring.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we've written to Stagecoach and given them a dates of our scrutiny meetings. We're waiting to hear back. We haven't had you back yet.
Nothing back yet.
Yeah. And then if they don't want to come to scrutiny, we'll ask for a separate workshop as well. But yeah, nothing yet.
I think there's a regional transport meeting this week as well, which we're expecting further feed, which will give us a better sort of picture then of what's going on. Public transport.
Thanks, Neil. Hannah?
Thanks. Just to follow up on the session we had on housing and homelessness, I believe it was agreed in that session that we would receive information on conversations that have been had so far with Welsh Government, because a lot of the report related to concerns about the implementation of Welsh Government policy. And I asked for information on how that had been fed back to Welsh Government, and there was a commitment to provide that information. I'm just wondering if we can follow up on when that will be received.
Okay, I haven't received anything yet, but I'll chase that up for you.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, okay, agenda item 8, any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I don't have any, so I'd just like to call the meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.